Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jimmy Bashar with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the California ISO customer call to discuss an update on our monthly effort to manage its full network model, or FNM. As mentioned in the market notice announced this call is targeted towards those users of the FNM who have submitted or who will submit CIM or Common Information Model submissions. First and foremost, thank you in advance for your participation today, especially given the current events. So we especially appreciate your engagement. Leading our presentation today will be our Ankit Mishra from our EMS IT group. We're also joined today by Charlie Moggenham, also from our EMS IT group, as well as Heather Kelly from our Market Services group, and Mike Turner from our Model and Contract Implementation group. In addition, our calls and webinars are recorded for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to the recordings after the meetings. The recordings will be publicly available on the ISO webpage for a limited time following the meetings. Of course, the recordings and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And lastly, if you have any questions, you can please raise your hand virtually by pressing #2. And we request that everybody please state your name and the company that you represent. We do encourage verbal questions only. However, if I do see any chat questions, I'll be sure to verbalize for folks on the call. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ankit.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. My name is Ankit Mishra from the EMS team. We have been working on FNM closely with all of the different teams, and today is an update on the experience that we have gathered in the year 2020 working on the monthly FNM cycles. And it's very interesting. So I'm excited to kind of share some of the findings and how the monthly network model process is working with you all. James, can we go to the next slide, please? So for the meeting today, I'll try to limit my overview to 15 minutes, and then we want to open it up for discussion. Essentially, the intention and the background of this meeting is that as we are working on the monthly network model deployments, we are now at a point where we are planning for our activities in 2021. And the data and the experience that we have gathered with the monthly network model updates, it gives us some insights on the amount and the magnitude of the network model changes that are coming our way in the monthly cycles. And it definitely has some interesting trends. So based on those trends, we found it of value to discuss those findings with all these stakeholders and kind of bounce these findings off of you and get your feedback. So that's the intent of the presentation today. Can we go to the next slide, please, James? All right. So as you know, our monthly network model update process, we have structured it, created a schedule around it. The same schedule is available on the CAISO site. And so far, this process for the year 2020 has been working out reasonably well. We are in the process of preparing the same schedule for 2021, and this conversation that we are having right now kind of ties into that. Next slide, please. I want to give you a quick overview of how the monthly network model cycle is structured at CAISO at a conceptual level. I'm not going to go into the deep intricacies of how it works, but essentially at any given point in time, the CAISO modeling team is working on two network models. The one model, we are working on building that network model. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks of time to build a network model, and then the testing teams are working on testing that network model. But at the same time, concurrently, we are also working on building the next network model. And this schematic tries to show that. So if you were to look at weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8, you can see that the first network model is in the testing phase, getting ready to be deployed to production, while our model building teams are building the next network model, which is going to follow the production deployment in the following weeks. Next slide, please. So this is the core of this presentation. This is the slide where I'm going to spend some time. We have tried to extract all the data from the RIMS application. Your teams are submitting all the network model changes, the scope items, and the files on the RIMS application. So now we have a collection of data which gives us some insights into how many changes were implemented, how many changes are submitted for future implementation. And we have tried to kind of mine that data and create some business knowledge out of it. So let me take this opportunity to present that information with you. I want to kind of situate you in this graph and what it is showing. The blue bars are the number of SIM entities who provided us with a network model to be considered for any specific network model cycle. So if you look at 20M3 model, there were 12 entities who provided us with the SIM file for inclusion in that network model. 20M4 and 20M6, we see that trend, the number of entities who are providing us with the SIM files kind of going down. In 20M4, we had about 9 entities. In 20M6, that went further down to 6 entities. So that's kind of the beginning of the year, and halfway through the year, we are seeing that the number of entities who are providing us with the SIM file to include in the network model, we are seeing kind of a downward trend. 20M7, which is the July model, we saw almost all entities again provide us with the SIM file. So that count jumped up to 10, 11 range. And we have some data, some forward-looking data for 20M8, which is the model that our modeling teams are just now starting to build. This is the August model, and again, in that model, we are seeing 11 entities who have provided us with the SIM file. So that's what the blue bars represent. Now, the green trend is the number of projects which are part of those SIM files. So as you know, every time you provide us with a SIM file, you provide us with a description of changes on what is actually being implemented in those SIM files. So we try to aggregate that data for all these SIM entities. And let me kind of refine that one more time. This data that I'm presenting, this is only for the entities who do provide us with the SIM file. We have another set of entities who do not use the SIM technology. They use more traditional ways of exchanging data with us for network model changes. Those also come to us in RIMS, but that data is not presented here. So this presentation is mostly focused towards the entities who are using the SIM technology to exchange the network model. So if we look at that green trend, which represents the total number of projects which are part of those SIM files, let's walk through an example. If we look at 20M3, I was explaining earlier that the blue bar represents the number of SIM entities, 11 to 12 SIM entities. When we look at all these scope documents and all the changes in those scope documents for those 11 entities, that comes out to close to 300 projects. So that's the point on the 20M3 model. And when we go towards 20M4 and 20M6, we are seeing a significant downward trend there. In 20M4, the total number of projects were in the 150 range, and in 20M6, that total number of projects which were part of those 6 SIM entities who provided us with the information for that model, it went down to close to 45 range. So you can see that the number of projects from 20M3 to 20M6, for all the way from 325, 350 projects range, it came down to about 45 projects in 20M6. Then in 20M7, which is the current model that we are working on, we see something representative of more entities providing us with a SIM file. So we got SIM files from 11 entities, and the total number of projects which were part of those 11 entities spiked significantly up from 20M6 to 20M7, back up to about 350 projects. So that's the current model, the July model. It's a significant model with a lot of changes. And now when we have some forward-looking data for the 20M8 model, I'm talking about the last blue bar in this trend. This is the August model, and what we are seeing in that is that we have, again, about the same number of entities providing us with the SIM file, but the total number of projects compared to 20M7 and 20M8, the total number of projects has a downward trend, and it's down to in the range of 100 projects in 20M8. So when we are looking at this data from planning perspective, it kind of shows peaks and valleys in the amount of work that we are trying to implement in every network model. And that is very interesting and presents variability in the amount of resources that we are allocating towards implementing these monthly network model cycles. So some of the key observations, when we looked at this data, some of the key observations that jump out at us, I tried to bullet those out. So let me kind of talk through those. I think I have already covered those, but I do want to go through these important ones that we see. So when we look at 20M7 and 20M8, the point I'm trying to make here is that it seems like about the same entities are providing us with the SIM file in the two models, 11 entities, but the number of projects between the two models are significantly different. So that's something that is of interest to us, and I'll talk about it more, why that matters, why is that significant. The other thing that is interesting is we see some models where a lesser number of entities are providing us with the SIM file versus the other models where the number of entities who are providing us SIM files jump up. When we look at 20M6 and 20M7, the number of entities is almost twice as many as 20M6. And I do want to point out that this is the current status. We do have additional entities who are interested in transitioning from traditional legacy methods of providing network model information to us to SIM files. So we are interfacing with additional entities, that set of entities I was talking about earlier who are currently not providing us with SIM files. We are working with those entities to kind of transition to a SIM-based model exchange, and come 2021, the year that we are trying to plan for, those entities will be SIM entities. So maybe let's run through the last two slides where we do have some discussion topics. James, let's go to the next slide. And once we are done talking through the slide, I want to come back to that visual to facilitate the discussion. So SIM technology, we recently have been gathering a lot of experience with it. I can say with some level of confidence that's true for all of you as well, because SIM method is something that we have recently adopted in the last few years, and it's a learning experience on both sides. But nevertheless, it's very exciting. It has a lot of efficiencies built into it, and it prevents sharing a lot of additional information which may not be the most efficient and robust way of exchanging network models. So SIM technology is great. It helps us out significantly in making the information communication robust and efficient. So we are definitely at that cutting edge of the technology. The SIM standard, the IEEE group on SIM, is still working on making the standard more robust. We do have WEC task force on SIM as well. So there's a lot of good work that's happening in this technology, and I think the fact that we are using this technology to exchange the network model is really encouraging. But from a planning perspective, we definitely see, at least in the current year, the data that we have available for the year 2020, we definitely see a lot of variability in the number of entities who are submitting the SIM files to us, and also the number of projects which are part of the SIM file data. Next slide, please, Jim. So just some questions to trigger the discussion. We are very interested in kind of hearing your thoughts on the data that we have presented, but to kind of guide that feedback, to guide that response, we have some questions that we want to lay out there. So when we look at this trend of entities in some model providing us with a SIM file and in some other models not providing us with a SIM file, the question from a planning perspective, how should we allocate resources to the process, the question that comes to our mind is, for the monthly network model submissions, are the entities foreseeing a need to submit the network model to us in every cycle? Is that what you anticipate going forward, that pretty much for all monthly network model cycles, there will always be a SIM file that you're submitting? And to more elaborate on that question, the information that we are very interested in is, are the monthly network model deadlines creating a sense of urgency and a sense of obligation on the entity's portion to provide us with the SIM file, even when the changes that are part of that SIM file may not be of material impact, of significance? So we are very interested in knowing that. And from the KAISO vantage point, what we are trying to get to is to get a sense from a planning perspective, when we see these valleys and peaks in the network model cycles. We were showing 20M6 to you earlier, where we had very little work for the SIM models, but we still had the full time allocated for that network model to be developed and tested. That represents to us a model where we are underutilizing the resources that we have allocated to this process. And at the same time, when that number of projects and the SIM entities, when they spike up in the subsequent network model, what that represents to us is that maybe we are not sufficiently resourced to deal with that network model cycle. So this significant variability between the two network models, it kind of creates a contrast that we are trying to understand better and plan for the next year. So that's where I'm going to end my presentation and encourage some discussion and feedback from you. James, can we go back to the slide where we had the visual? Thank you.
Thanks, Ankit, for all of that. As mentioned, folks, please push #2 if you'd like to ask Ankit a question. Appreciate all of that explanation, Ankit.
Sure.
We do have several questions here in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your name and question.
Hi, Ankit. This is Chris Bennett from Arizona Public Service. I would say from our point of view, we don't have enough people to submit a model every month. Having said that, we would probably, our expectation is to submit every 3 months. But having said that, I do appreciate that you have windows open every month so that we're not, we don't have to wait for a 3-month window to open up. If something happens and we can get something in earlier, or the flip side, we don't have an awful lot, we can maybe wait for the next model. I guess that's where we're coming from on that. We do appreciate that you have so many opportunities to put a model in, but we probably won't be submitting every month.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that comment. That's kind of in line with what our understanding of the entity's processes are. We do understand and appreciate that it was really important, it continues to be very important to have those monthly network model opportunities available to make a change, and that may or may not materialize as an actual change that you need to submit. So I understand your comment. Thank you for that.
And I appreciate the term opportunity. That's a wonderful term, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we do have one more caller here in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your name and question.
Yeah, hi, Ankit. This is Dave Douglas from PG&E.
Hi, Dave.
I'm looking at this. First of all, it looks like a very limited data set. You only have essentially 5 data points of data. And I think you might be a little premature trying to draw a trend from that because it's just literally, a little over half a year worth of consideration. And as you're well aware, projects tend to cycle, and a lot of things come to get things, when we can do things, which is in the fall, winter, and to some extent in spring, and maybe not so much being able to put things into play in the summertime because of, that's when our systems are taxed the most. So I guess I'm a little, I'm thinking maybe you might want to look at your data differently and look at the data you get for all your projects and see if you can pull a trend, as far as the number of projects at least. That might be more useful and helpful to you in trying to anticipate your workload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good feedback, Dave. The reason we have 5 data points is because that represents the monthly network model cycle start. So we are focusing on the time frame where we have transitioned from the quarterly network model cycle to a monthly network model cycle. And you bring up a good point that I didn't get a chance to mention earlier. Why is it that we are treating the SIM model entities and other entities who are not using this technology as 2 separate buckets? And the comment that you made is a really good segue for me to kind of dive into that. So the reason we are treating SIM entities differently and talking and focusing on SIM entities is when we process the data that the SIM entity has provided to KAISO. As you know, we are talking about 2 different attributes: the number of SIM entities that have provided us with the SIM file, specifically looking at the 20M8 model. That serves as a really good example for the point I'm trying to make. So we see that the number of entities who have provided the SIM model to us is 11. So now when an entity provides a SIM file to us, regardless of the number of changes which are in that SIM file, there is a base amount of work that we always need to invest in processing of that SIM file, regardless of the number of changes in it. So if there is a scenario where we get a SIM file with very limited changes, the ratio of the reduction or the amount of effort that we have to put towards in processing that SIM file versus another SIM file which has a lot of changes is not always corresponding to the number of projects in it. So I used a lot of words here. Let me try to simplify it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that in every SIM file, regardless of the number of projects, if there is a SIM file that we need to process, we need to invest an amount of time which falls in the range of 1 to 2 days to process that SIM file. And if there are not a number of projects in it, that doesn't reduce the amount of time that we have to spend processing that SIM file. So as we are planning towards the next year, and the other important fact about next year is that the number of SIM entities that we have right now is in the vicinity of 12 SIM entities. Come next year, 2021, the pool of entities that we are trying to plan for is in the range of 20. So we are seeing additional 8 to 10 SIM entities that potentially will be exchanging models with us in the SIM format. So as we are moving in that direction and we are seeing these trends, impact of it on the monthly model, we found it of a real importance to bring this data and information to all the entities who are providing us with the SIM file, and that's kind of the context to it. But I appreciate your comment. The reason we only have 5 data points is because that's when we started the monthly network model, and we intend to present more of this data as we have more experience with this. We expect to come back to you with more of similar type of presentations and insights from the data.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me, Ankit. And I recognize you just started, but it's just that you have just started. So I don't know if you really have enough data yet to properly identify how much behavior changed, because as you're saying, you're going to get 8 more potential SIM providers, and you have no idea what they're going to do. So, you have a limited data set here, and then you know it's going to go up. So I think that's the work. That's the big takeaway is that workload's going to go up.
So I appreciate that feedback, right? But at the same time, we do want to make a distinction. The piece that we just start with, the new experience that we are gathering now for the last 5 data points is with the monthly network model. However, our experience with SIM is fairly longer. We have been dealing with the SIM technology for last 5 years. With the start of the EIM implementation, we have been using the SIM technology as the vehicle, as the key method of exchanging information and onboarding the entity. So I appreciate your comment, but I wanted to clarify that distinction. These new data points are specifically focused towards the monthly network model and not representative of our experience with SIM.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying it's a limited set, so you don't want to draw too big a conclusion yet.
Yep.
All right, we do have a couple more callers here in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your name and question.
Yeah, hi, this is Lance McDaniel with Pacificor. I'm encouraged to hear that you say that you have almost going to double your number of SIM submittal customers next year. That's good for us. The SIM process is, as we all know, it's difficult to learn. It's difficult to find the right people that know how to do it. So the more of us that are doing it, the better we are at pushing that product development, right? From our point of view, the idea of a monthly cycle is useful. I kind of, one of the other people have mentioned the opportunity to present something each month is nice, because for us, if let's say we had a 3-month cycle and we missed it, if an entity is trying to get online and they miss their window, the idea of telling them that they have to wait an additional 3 months is, financially, you would get an enormous amount of pushback on that, right? So the opportunity for us to be able to have this every month, I highly encourage that we continue that.
That makes sense, yeah. So as we're looking through this, right, so we had kind of anticipated that entities have a value to see that opening to make some significant changes which are of material impact. So not having that monthly opportunity is as you framed it, is challenging, because if we are not doing it monthly, we are doing it on a quarterly basis, and then once we miss an opportunity, the next opportunity doesn't show up till much later, and that has an impact. So we are aware of that, and we want to kind of continue down this path of creating that opportunity every month. But at the same time, we are trying to kind of balance it with the question. James, if you could go to the last slide, please. When we look at these models where everyone is submitting to us a SIM file in every network model, we're trying to kind of get a sense of, is it because we now have an opportunity to provide a network model every month, everyone feels an obligation to provide that file, or do we have some possibilities and opportunities to evaluate the changes in the SIM file and identify the ones of material nature which have an impact, which could have a financial impact, which could have a reliability impact, and schedule them in such a way that they are part of a SIM file with significant number of changes presented. So the idea is, if we are processing a SIM file from an entity, it has all the changes in it which are of material nature, of importance, that we are able to to process together and not in piecemeal. So we're trying to kind of see that and trying to balance it with the comments that you and Chris made that you don't anticipate to have so many changes in the system, but you appreciate the opportunity. You like the opportunity of implementing those changes when feasible.
Part of what you said is correct. Some of the people that are doing this, like Pacificor as an example, we bring in a lot of projects, right? And there's several of us on this call that are probably in a similar stature, right, where they just bring in, we're probably your problem customers from your point of view, right? Because we're bringing in just so much stuff. It impacts us if we have to tell people on the far side that, hey, you know what, you missed your window of opportunity, you got to wait a quarter. On the other side of that, though, it almost sounds like you're asking us to do some additional modeling potentially to say, okay, well, this is our normal model, this is the model for the people that are less impactful. I think that you're asking for all of the various different customers of yours to do some additional work there that would be, you know, we're probably not scoped to set up to manage that, right?
No. So I can see why I may have given that impression. The data that we have collected for the last 5 models, we don't have a proposal at this point, right? So we are not proposing to make any changes to the process. What we are trying to do is, in this stakeholder engagement, trying to kind of present the variability that we are seeing in the process of doing the network model changes, and we are trying to see that these peaks and valleys that we are seeing, is this a result of a fixed time frame that we have laid out there, or would it be better for us to kind of give some flexibility around when to send the model, right? If we are accepting the network model on a monthly basis and the entities are providing us whatever they have at that time in that monthly cycle, that's one paradigm. That's a paradigm we currently seem to be in, versus another one where you know that there are changes that are of significance that you have implemented in your EMS system, and only that triggering a submission of the network model to CAISO for implementation in the SIM file. Am I kind of able to distinguish those two different paradigms?
I see what you're trying to say. It's the last sticking point that you mentioned that is the difficulty, right? If we pick up a paradigm where us as your customers are managing, you know, let's say, for example, for me, I might have 5 projects coming this cycle, this month, right? Of those 5 projects, you're wanting me to track which ones are impactful to your model, to the SIM submission, right? And so I would have to say, okay, of these 5, let's say 3 of them are going through, 2 of them will come in on a subsequent deployment to you via SIM, right? Whether that be the following month or 3 months down the line. That means I'm having to keep track of that effort separately from what I'm sending you. For example, if this other data, these other 2 projects are not coming in for 3 months, then for the next 3 months, I'm sending you half of my stuff for these, plus the new stuff that's coming in. Of the new ones that are coming in, I'm going to have to start staggering, going, okay, over the course of the next 3 months, I'm submitting 15 projects. This month, 5 of them go through. That next month, 8 of them go through. It starts.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. That's not what the intention is. So in your example, Lance, the way at least I was thinking about what potential solutions to this variability may be when I'm thinking about this. So in this example, where you have said there were 16 projects, and you having to kind of think about when to model those 16 projects. What we are thinking, or at least as you're describing this problem to us, what's coming to my mind is if you were to implement all those 16 projects in a model when they are available to you, and you send us that model, what that translates into is that all of your projects are now implemented in the model, and they are part of the SIM file that you provided to us. And that would free up your staff to then having the need to continue to model them in the subsequent models. And they are all implemented in that one SIM file. And when CAISO is processing it in a monthly network model, they are all implemented. And that would kind of reduce the need to have subsequent monthly network model deployments. And you can maybe follow the paradigm that Chris was talking about, that then you can have, if there is a future material change that comes up, then that happens in 2 or 3 months down the line, maybe in a quarterly submission or something to that effect, because all the changes that you anticipate are modeled upfront in that one network model that you provided to us. And this ties to that point I was trying to clarify, that if we are processing a SIM file, there is a baseline effort that we need to put in, regardless of the number of changes in the SIM file. So from our perspective, we are not saying that you should piecemeal and manage them in your subsequent submissions. From our vantage point, we do want all of your changes that you know of upfront, and that helps us to kind of step away from that baseline effort in each monthly network model update. We can put that investment up front in one network model, make all those changes in one go, and that frees up your staff, that frees up our need to process each of those smaller SIM files. That's the distinction I was trying to make.
I'd be interested to hear what the other entities have to say on that. From my point of view, we only have 1 or 2 people, closer to 1, that build this SIM idea, that build the SIM model and SIM entity. We don't have a staff. It's a staff of 1. Maybe I need more staff on that, but I'd be interested to hear what the other entities think of your proposal here. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Thanks, Lance.
Right, we do have one more caller here in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your name and question.
Hi, Ankit. Hello, everybody. This is Devesh from Bank SMUD. From our perspective, we actually appreciate the monthly cycle as opposed to the 3-monthly cycle. And in this, I know that I'm echoing several other folks from before. But yeah, we appreciate the flexibility of being able to submit models every month. And it kind of looks like we do submit projects nearly every month to CAISO. And one thing that I was going to suggest to you guys is maybe in your scope document or somewhere you can ask us for a required by date so that we can specify, hey, if a new substation is going in, when do we expect it to go live? Because we generally, as soon as we have the information, we model it, we put it in the model, and we try to submit it as soon as possible. But for your own load balancing on your end, you could potentially divvy up the stuff and see that if all the projects in my submittal in May are not really going live for like the next 6 months or something, maybe you can hold it off and pick it up at a time when you have, fewer things. So if you can have something like that, could help you guys schedule your thing better.
Yeah. So thank you, Devesh, for the comment. That makes sense. And yes, exactly right. So we do have something like that already. We do have an attribute in RIMS where you can specify going live by. But the way we try to deal with the SIM entities, right? Because the information is available to us in the SIM file, we don't usually pick and choose. If the model is reflected in the SIM file, we just make that change. We make our model to align with your model regardless of when that equipment is going live. And that actually works for us. And that's different than the traditional approach where all changes are being kind of made at individual project level, and having that targeted in-service date is can be useful and can help us drive which changes to be implemented when. So in the paradigm of SIM, knowing that it's a new way of kind of exchanging model with the entities, from our vantage point at least, it makes sense to have all the changes that we know of in the SIM file, and we model all of those in one shot. So what that really gives us, as Lance and we were discussing earlier, that if all those changes are there in one file or in one network model, and if I shouldn't be saying all, if most of the changes are concentrated in those SIM files which are more impactful in their nature, meaning that they have most of the changes implemented there, as is the case in your file, then we can process it in one shot, and that baseline effort that we have to invest in processing smaller SIM files, we can step away from that. So that's one way we are kind of trying to approach this.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, and we do have one more caller here in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your name and question.
Hello, everybody. This is Michael Yao from BC Hydro and BCRC. So I'd just like to ask a few questions to the group instead of Ankit, my friend. If I have questions, I call you later. But this is more the question for the group who actually use the SIM model and ICCP for their external system. So the first question is that any entity actually use the WIM SIM file and ICCP for their external system? I guess it would, the answer would be yes. I cannot hear you, your answer, but I would assume that the answer is yes. If that is the case, then you would care the difference, if any difference. Or we can give you an example about the difference. The easy to understand example is from the BC Hydro portion. We make available about 16K ICCP items, and the KSO or RC West, we saw that it's reading about 14K, but actually when make available for everybody else, only 11K. So then there's a small gap, about 3,000 items that is not cannot get from us. So that is even though we don't really care our portion, but we kind of thinking any other entity may have the similar kind of difference. So then if you use that model or ICCP for your external modeling, then you may care that the difference. And the question is more, we have been asking the question, how do we know the difference, or easy way to identify the difference? And the second one is, what is the impact of those differences? Because we only know our system, and then the external system, we may not have that knowledge to identify the actual difference and also the impact of the difference to your external system. So that is my question. So hopefully I can get an answer from you guys, even for in the future. When we send an email, we could exchange that kind of experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Mike.
At this time, there are no other questions in the queue. Once again, pressing #2 will indicate that you wish to ask a question.
All right, well, thanks so much, folks. We'll give a few more seconds if there's any remaining questions, but this is the end of the slide deck, and thank you, Ankit, once more for presenting, and thank you, folks, again, for participating throughout. As mentioned, this was recorded, so you can look for that to be available on the miscellaneous meetings page on our website within the next couple of business days. And before we do close out, just checking back once more for any last questions, operator.
There are no further questions in the queue.
Yeah. So, James, if I may present some closing thoughts from my end before you close out the session. I do want to thank everyone for the time and the feedback that they're providing into this process. As you know, monthly F&M cycle is something relatively new. We are learning as we are going. It's our intent to keep the schedule that we publish and develop and deploy models on the dates that we have published. And as we are planning for the next year, we found it of importance to engage with all the stakeholders, kind of be a little bit more transparent about how we are approaching and doing this activity in 2020 and how we are planning for it in 2021. I really appreciate all the comments and the feedback. We expect and hope to continue this conversation. We'll have some additional stakeholder calls on the same theme in future. We don't have anything on the calendar, but as we get more insights, as we have more information on how this process is working, we plan to continue to do some additional information exchange on this subject. But I do really appreciate the comments. I do expect to kind of engage more in those conversations, maybe in a one-on-one setting. So I appreciate all the feedback, and I'll follow up with the concerns and the feedback that was shared with us.
Thanks, Ankit. And thanks once more, folks. As Ankit mentioned, we look forward to working with you moving forward in this new process. And with that, thanks again, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.